I used to think silence between lovers meant comfort. A sign that words weren't needed, that the bond was deeper than conversation. But now, as I lie next to him in this bed that still smells faintly of lavender and something like smoke, the silence between us feels like a canyon, wide, cold, and impossible to cross. He's awake. I know because I can hear the tiny hitch in his breath, the way it catches when he knows I'm watching him in the dark. His back is to me like it always is, and I'm curled into myself, pretending I don't feel the absence of his touch like a wound. It's been 10 months. 10 months of shared dinners, whispered dreams, fingers brushing over wine glasses and morning coffee. 10 months of late-night laughter, of clothes folded together, of plans made about someday. 10 months. And not once has he made love to me. Not even tried. The first few weeks I told myself he was being respectful. That maybe he wanted to take it slow to build something deeper than lust. It was flattering in a way, old-fashioned. I romanticized everything back then, even the empty space between our bodies. But now I can't pretend it doesn't ache. Tonight I worked up the nerve. I wore the lingerie I bought on a whim months ago and never had the courage to wear. Deep red, laced, something that made me feel more like a woman than a porcelain doll. I stood in front of him in the bedroom, the soft glow of the bedside lamp making everything look like it belonged in a dream. I whispered his name. He looked up from his book, his eyes widening just slightly before softening, like he was about to apologize for something he hadn't done yet. And then he smiled, sadly, and said the same thing he always does. "You're too pure for me." That word, pure, it stuck in my throat like something sour. I didn't know what to say. Should I have thanked him? Slapped him? Cried? Instead, I crawled under the covers and turned away from him, blinking into the darkness, trying to ignore the feeling that something was being kept from me. Something important. Something heavy. Now he shifts again and I hear him reach for the lamp. The room goes darker, if that's even possible. He thinks I'm asleep. I'm not. He doesn't know that I've started noticing the inconsistencies. The way his eyes flicker when I mention the future. The way he never undresses in front of me. The way he showers alone, locks the door. The way he looks at me sometimes, not with lust but with something closer to guilt. I thought love was enough. But love without desire feels like a mirror with no reflection. I don't know if I'm losing him or if I never really had him in the first place. I don't sleep. Not really. At some point during the night when his breathing is steady and deep, I get up quietly. The room is cold under my bare feet and I pull his shirt tighter around my body. I don't know what I'm looking for. Maybe answers. Maybe proof that I'm not crazy. I end up in his study. The one room in the house that's always locked unless he's inside. Tonight he forgot to lock it. Or maybe he's tired of pretending. The desk is neat, too neat. Every drawer perfectly aligned, his pens placed with military precision. I almost don't see the envelope tucked under his planner. It's aged. The corners slightly frayed, the paper yellowing just enough to tell me it's been here for a while. My name isn't on it, but something pulls me toward it like gravity. I open it slowly, carefully, heart pounding in my throat. The handwriting isn't his. "You don't have to be ashamed. I miss the way you touched me. I still dream about that night in Lisbon." Lisbon. My blood runs cold. The signature is a name I don't recognize. But the tone, the intimacy, it's unmistakable. He never slept with me. Not because he couldn't, but because he already did with someone else. Someone he still dreams about. I fold the letter and slide it back exactly where I found it, my hands trembling. My breath is shallow, as if I've been running and only now realized I'm lost. Back in bed, I slide under the covers beside him. He doesn't stir. His breathing stays even. He sleeps like someone who isn't haunted. But I am. And now I know. I'm not the only ghost in this relationship. The morning light filters through the curtains like it always does. Soft, golden, almost tender. It paints the room in a glow that used to make me feel safe. But today it feels like a spotlight on everything that's broken. He's already up when I wake. I hear the familiar clinking of a spoon stirring into a ceramic mug. The smell of coffee wafts in, rich and bittersweet. It used to be my favorite part of the day, waking to that smell. Now it makes my stomach turn. I sit up slowly, my fingers brushing the spot beside me, cold. He hasn't been in bed for a while. I don't say anything when I walk into the kitchen. He smiles, offers me my mug like nothing's wrong. His hair is still damp from the shower and he's already dressed in that casual, perfect way he always is. I wonder if he knows I was in his study. If he'll say anything. If he'll pretend. Did you sleep well? He asks, his voice light. I nod, lying without thinking. Yeah. You. He shrugs. I kept waking up. Restless. I study his face. He's good at this, pretending. Or maybe I'm just bad at seeing the truth. We sit in silence for a few minutes, sipping our coffee. I keep replaying the letter in my mind. The way it was folded. The choice of words. The way it felt like a memory I was never part of. I want to ask him outright. Confront him. But instead I say, "You've been to Lisbon?" He freezes for just a second, but it's enough. Yeah, he says after a pause. A few years ago. Business trip. I raise an eyebrow. Business, huh? He doesn't meet my gaze. Why do you ask? I just came across a travel blog last night. I lie smoothly. Made me think of all the places I haven't been yet. He nods slowly, sipping his coffee. His hands are too steady. His smile too careful. Later that day I call Lila my best friend. She's always been the kind of person who sees through people quickly, especially men. I sit in the car outside the grocery store with my phone on speaker, staring blankly at people walking by as I talk to her. Wait, he said you're too pure? She asks, incredulous. Yeah, I mutter. Multiple times. There's a pause, then her voice softens. That's not a compliment, babe. That's deflection. I thought maybe, I don't know, that he respected me too much or something. Or he's hiding something. Or someone, she says bluntly. You've never checked his phone? I don't want to be that person. Sometimes, that person finds the truth. I don't answer. She sighs. Look, if he's making you feel like you're the problem, when he's the one withholding, you need to ask yourself why you're trying so hard to earn something that should already be yours. Her words stay with me for the rest of the day. I go through the motions, shopping, cleaning, pretending I'm okay. But something in me has shifted. That night I try again. Not with lingerie or candles. Just honesty. We're in bed, the lights dimmed, the air quiet. Can I ask you something? I whisper. He turns his head, eyes finding mine in the dark. Of course. Do you still find me attractive? He flinches almost imperceptibly. Then he reaches out and brushes a strand of hair behind my ear. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever known. That's not what I asked. He pulls his hand back slowly. It's not about attraction. Then what is it about? My voice breaks on the last word. He sighs, running a hand through his hair. You don't understand. Different. You're light. I don't want to ruin that. Ruin? I echo, stunned. I've made mistakes. Hurt people. Used people. But with you, I want to be better. His words are poetic. They should feel noble. But all I hear is, I don't want you enough to risk touching you. I nod slowly, heart heavy. I turn away from him, curling into myself like I did last night. And the night before. In the dark, I open my phone and scroll through my gallery. There's a photo of us from when we first started dating. We're laughing. His hand is around my waist. His lips are at my temple. I stare at it, then at the man lying behind me now, quiet and untouched. And I wonder which version of him was real. I tell myself I'll sleep. That I'll wait just a little longer for answers. But I know better. And tomorrow I'll start looking for them. The idea of getting away came from him. A weekend together, just the two of us. He said he wanted to reconnect. The word rolled off his tongue like it held the promise of something healing. Maybe it did. Or maybe it was just another way to delay the inevitable. We drove up to the coast early Friday morning. He let me choose the music like he always does and held my hand between gear shifts. I tried not to read into it too much. Tried not to hope. But my fingers kept tightening around his, searching for something real beneath the surface. The cabin was beautiful. Tucked away in the woods, a short walk from the ocean. There was a fireplace, a record player, even a little balcony that overlooked the trees. Felt like a movie set. Too perfect. Too staged. He was light-hearted the whole time, laughing more, touching me in little ways that made me ache. A hand at the small of my back, a kiss on my forehead. But never more than that. Always restrained. Always just enough to keep me wondering. The first night we cooked dinner together. I watched him move around the kitchen like he belonged there, barefoot and calm, chopping herbs with precision. He looked so comfortable, like a man without secrets. But I knew better now. We ate by candlelight, the windows fogged from the heat. I wore a sweater 2 sizes too big, nothing underneath. It slipped off my shoulder and his eyes lingered for just a second before he looked away. After dinner we sat by the fire drinking red wine and sharing stories. It was the most connected I'd felt to him in weeks. He told me about his childhood, how his parents barely touched, how silence was love in his family. I told him about the time I broke my arm as a kid, and how no one showed up to the hospital except my piano teacher. We both laughed too hard, like we were trying to fill the space that pain left behind. At some point I leaned into him, my cheek against his chest. His arm wrapped around me. I felt his breath slow, his body warm against mine. Then I tilted my face up to kiss him. He froze. I waited, my lips almost touching his. But he didn't move. His hand tightened around my shoulder, gently pushing me back. "I can't," he whispered. "Not tonight." I sat there, stunned. "Why?" He closed his eyes, breathing deeply. "You're just too good. I don't want to ruin that." There it was again. Too good. Too pure. Too something. I pulled away slowly and stood up, wrapping the sweater around myself tighter. "You keep saying that like it's a compliment." "It is," he said quickly. "You don't understand." "You're right," I cut him off. "I don't." I went to bed before him, curled under the heavy cabin quilt, eyes burning. I listened as he stayed out by the fire, pacing. At one point I heard him muttering to himself, low and sharp, like he was arguing with a ghost. In the morning I found his bag on the bathroom counter, half-zipped. I wasn't even trying to snoop. I just went in to grab my toothbrush. But something caught my eye. A pill bottle. I recognized the label immediately, strong anti-anxiety meds. But the name on the bottle wasn't his. I stared at it for a long time. Then I picked it up and read the label again. The name was feminine, unfamiliar. The date was recent. My chest tightened. I put it back exactly where I found it. Stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. My face was pale, my eyes dull. There were fine lines around my mouth I didn't remember having before. When I walked back into the bedroom, he was standing by the window, shirtless, sipping coffee like nothing had changed. Like the earth hadn't just tilted beneath my feet. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," I echoed, forcing a smile. I didn't say anything about the pills. Not yet. But something inside me shifted. This trip wasn't about reconnecting. It was about hiding. And I was done being kept in the dark. He said he was going into town for supplies. Just a quick drive. Coffee filters, eggs, maybe a newspaper if they had one. I watched him from the window as he slid into the rental car, casual as ever, and pulled out of the gravel driveway with the ease of someone who had nothing to hide. But I knew better now. The bottle in the bathroom haunted me. That name, that prescription. Someone else's. It was too recent to ignore. Too intimate to be innocent. I waited 5 minutes after he left. Then I grabbed my coat and keys and followed. The roads were winding, flanked by trees tall enough to blot out the sun. The GPS signal cut in and out, so I kept my distance, using instinct more than technology. My hands were slick on the wheel. Every turn felt like a betrayal. I told myself I'd only follow him to town. Just long enough to ease the gnawing in my stomach. Just long enough to see that I was wrong. But I wasn't. He didn't stop at the market. He drove past it, past the little cafes in the bookstore. Past the pharmacy. He took a sharp turn down a road I hadn't noticed before. Narrow, gravel, unmarked. I slowed and turned, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the tires on the rocks. I parked on the shoulder when I saw the building. A clinic. Modest, a little run down. There were no signs out front, but the windows were frosted and the parking lot was half full. It didn't look like a hospital. It looked private, quiet. I stayed in the car, hunched low, watching. He got out. Walked inside without looking back. No hesitation. I don't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes? 3. My legs were twitching. My palms ached from clenching the steering wheel. Then she came out. A woman, mid-30s, maybe a little older. Tired eyes, drawn face. Thin but not delicate. Her walk was slow, like someone learning how to exist in their body again. She looked familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. He followed her out a few seconds later. He wasn't touching her, but the space between them felt like something sacred. Or dangerous. They talked, their voices too soft to hear from where I was parked. I saw his hand lift toward her face, a gesture of comfort, of knowing. She flinched at first, then leaned in, letting him tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. My stomach turned. He looked at her the way he used to look at me before the walls. Before the distance. There was something between them, something unspoken and weighty. Not lust. Not quite love either. Guilt maybe. History. And then, just before they parted, she reached into her coat pocket and handed him something. A small paper bag. He nodded and placed it carefully inside his own jacket. No words. Just that. When she turned to go back inside, she caught sight of my car. For a second our eyes locked. I froze. Her expression shifted, not surprise, not curiosity. Something closer to pity. As if she already knew who I was and why I was there. As if I wasn't the first woman to follow him. I ducked down instinctively, my breath shallow. My chest was tight, my throat dry. When I looked back up, she was gone. And so was he. By the time I got back to the cabin, the sun had started its descent behind the trees. He was already there, chopping vegetables like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just walked into a private clinic and shared something wordless with a woman I'd never met. Find what you needed? I asked, voice light. He looked up and smiled. Yeah. Got everything. He didn't mention the clinic. Or the bag. Or the woman. I didn't ask. Not yet. That night he kissed me on the forehead before we went to bed. His lips were warm, his eyes tired. And for a moment I almost let myself believe the version of him that made dinner, laughed over wine, and kissed me softly was the real one. But I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. And in the silence between us, something else had begun to grow. Not love. Not fear. But rage. The drive home felt longer than the drive there. Maybe because I couldn't stop replaying everything in my mind. The letter, the pills, the woman, her eyes when she saw me. The silence in the car stretched out between us. Taut and suffocating. He hummed along to some old indie song on the radio, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel like he wasn't unraveling everything we had with every mile. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I stared out the window, watching the trees blur into one another, wondering how long I'd been complicit in my own delusion. When we got home, he carried our bags inside, humming still like nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, watching him move through our space. Our home, as if it were sacred ground he hadn't already desecrated. Later that evening I found myself scrolling through old messages. Our early days. The way he used to text me paragraphs just to say good morning. The first selfie he sent, grinning, tousled hair, half a cup of coffee in hand. The one where I told him he looked like trouble. He replied, only for people I can't stop thinking about. I used to think that meant me. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear landed on the screen. That night I didn't bother trying. I got into bed fully clothed and turned to the wall. He came in late, smelling like aftershave and winter air. I felt the bed shift as he lay down beside me, but he didn't reach for me. He never does. In the dark, his voice was quiet. Did you have a good time? I hated how badly I wanted to lie. No, I said. Not really. He was silent for a while and I thought that would be the end of it. But then he whispered, I'm sorry. I know you wanted more. It was the closest thing to honesty I'd heard from him in weeks. But it wasn't enough. What are you so afraid of? I asked, turning to face him. Of me? Of sex? Of what? He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the ceiling like it held all the explanations he wasn't ready to give. I've hurt people before, he said finally. Used them. Broke them. I don't want to do that to you. I stared at him, searching for sincerity. You think not touching me is protection? I think it's restraint, he said. Because with you, it would mean something. And I'm not sure I deserve that. His voice cracked just slightly at the end like the truth was trying to claw its way out. And for a moment, just a brief, agonizing moment, I felt sorry for him. I reached for his hand but he pulled it away. Not harshly, but deliberately. I turned away again, the warmth of that almost touch already fading. The next morning I called my sister. We hadn't spoken much in the past year. Too many old wounds, too many words we never really forgave each other for. But something in me needed her now. She answered on the third ring. Wow, she said. Hell must be freezing. Don't start, I murmured. There was a pause. Then softly, what's going on? I told her. Not everything. But enough. She listened without interrupting. No jokes. No sarcasm. Just breathing on the other end of the line. When I finished there was a long silence. Then she said, You know this isn't love, right? I closed my eyes. I don't know what it is. It's punishment, she said. For something you never did. That hit harder than I expected. We talked for a while after that about nothing mostly, but it felt better than the silence I'd been living in. When I hung up, I stared at the wall and wondered how I'd let things get so far. How I'd mistaken his boundaries for something noble. How I'd swallowed my own needs just to keep him close. That evening he made dinner. Pasta. He even lit candles like we used to in the beginning. He was trying in his own way. But I couldn't eat. Couldn't fake it. After we cleaned up, he sat on the couch with a book. I lingered by the window, arms wrapped around myself. I needed air. Space. Something real. I'm going out, I said suddenly. He looked up surprised. Where? I didn't answer. I just grabbed my coat and walked out. I didn't even know where I was going. But I knew I couldn't keep standing still. I ended up at the park near the river, the one with the crooked benches and the graffiti-covered bridge. It was cold, but I didn't care. I walked in circles, hands jammed deep in my coat pockets, trying to shake the feeling that had taken up permanent residence in my chest. This strange, dull ache that no amount of distance could ease. I sat on a bench beneath a broken street lamp and stared at the water. The current was slow tonight, like it too was carrying something it didn't want. That's how I felt, heavy with words I couldn't say and truths I didn't want to face. My phone buzzed twice. His name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the Notes app and started typing. Not a message. Just thoughts. Rage. Hurt. Questions I'd never had the courage to ask out loud. Why didn't you want me? Why did you choose silence over honesty? Why did I let you? It felt pathetic but also freeing, like dragging poison out of a wound. When I got home, the apartment was dark. He'd gone to bed without me. I moved quietly, brushing my teeth in the dim bathroom light, avoiding my own reflection. I didn't want to see what this version of me looked like, the one who begged without words and suffered in silence. But when I stepped into the bedroom, I froze. There was a journal on my pillow. I recognized the leather cover, the little tear at the spine. I'd seen him scribble in it late at night, always shutting it quickly if I came too close. It had always been off limits. But now it was there, waiting. A note sat on top. If you really want to understand, start here. I stood there staring at it, my heart pounding so loud it felt like it echoed off the walls. I picked it up slowly, sat at the edge of the bed and began to read. The entries were dated months before we met. Some were short, angry, disjointed. Others were long, aching paragraphs filled with guilt and confusion. One name appeared over and over again, Nina. I read about a relationship built on fire and obsession. About a woman who drew him in and broke him apart in equal measure. There were stories of nights that ended in shouting matches, of bruises, emotional and maybe physical too, of passion twisted into something violent, of control disguised as love. There was one entry that made my skin go cold. The last night, she said I made her feel worthless. That I took something from her she didn't know how to get back. I didn't touch her after that. I couldn't. I promised myself I wouldn't be that man again. I closed the journal, my hands trembling. So this was it. His guilt. His penance. His fear wrapped in the illusion of virtue. He hadn't withheld out of respect. He'd withheld because he believed that intimacy was a weapon he no longer trusted himself to use. And I, naive, hopeful, had mistaken that fear for protection. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. All I knew was that I felt like a ghost in my own relationship. Like I'd been dancing around his trauma without even realizing it, mistaking his silence for stillness when it was really a cage. I didn't wake him. I slid into bed beside him and stared at the ceiling, tears trailing into my hairline. The next morning I didn't speak a word to him. Not when he made coffee. Not when he kissed my cheek on his way out the door. I spent the day writing. Journaling like he had. Pouring out everything I'd buried. My loneliness, my anger, my yearning. I wrote about the girl I used to be before him, before all of this. The girl who wanted to be wanted, who thought love meant shrinking herself to fit inside someone else's boundaries. And when my hand cramped and my eyes burned, I finally closed the notebook and stood. I walked to the bathroom to wash my face, to clear my head, and that's when I noticed the voicemail. He rarely left them. Usually just texts or quick calls. But this one was different. His voice, low and shaky. There's something I haven't told you. Something I'm not sure how to say. I didn't want to do this over the phone, but I can't keep pretending. I made a mistake. Please, let me explain. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew it wasn't small. And whatever it was, it had already begun to crack the last piece of the foundation we were standing on. I didn't listen to the voicemail again. Once was enough. His voice had that tremble in it, the kind that says everything's about to change. That whatever comes next, I won't be the same afterward. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, gripping my phone like it had become a bomb, and I waited. Waited for the door to open. For him to walk in with some rehearsed explanation or a half-truth dressed up as vulnerability. But he didn't come home that night. Or the next. By the third day I stopped pretending I wasn't unraveling. I called him once. Straight to voicemail. I texted, nothing dramatic, just call me. Please. Still nothing. The silence felt sharper now. Deliberate. I tried to tell myself I didn't care. That maybe this was a blessing. Maybe this was how things ended. With distance instead of screaming, with a quiet fade instead of a messy implosion. But I couldn't let it go. I needed to know what he meant. What mistake? What truth had he been choking on for so long he finally couldn't keep it in? By the time he finally walked through the door, it was almost midnight. I was sitting at the kitchen table, lights low, a single candle burning beside my untouched tea. I didn't flinch when I heard his keys. I didn't even turn my head. But I felt him stop in the doorway. Felt the weight of his eyes on me. I didn't know if I should come back, he said quietly. I looked up. Looked hollow. Like someone who hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't stopped thinking. You left me here, I said, my voice even. You left after dropping a bomb in my voicemail and then disappeared. He stepped inside slowly, dropping his bag to the floor. I'm sorry. That's not enough. He nodded like he knew that. Like he'd already told himself the same thing 100 times. I've been seeing someone, he said. The words hit me like a punch, but I didn't move. My breath caught, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. She's not someone new, he continued, pain flickering across his face. It's Nina. I already knew the name. From the journal. From the way it seemed to echo in the quiet spaces between us. I thought you said you were done with her. I thought I was, he whispered. But I kept checking on her. She relapsed. She called me one night crying and I couldn't ignore it. And what? You slept with her? I asked, my voice sharper now, rising with each syllable. No, he said quickly. Not like that. I swear. But we were close again. Emotionally. I was trying to fix something that broke a long time ago. I stood up. My legs were trembling. So while I was lying in our bed wondering why you wouldn't touch me, you were off playing savior to the woman who destroyed you. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like, I demanded. Tell me why I've been sitting here blaming myself for your walls, your silence, your fear, when all this time you were still hers. He looked like he wanted to say something, but nothing came. His mouth opened. Closed. Were you ever going to tell me? I asked. He swallowed. I didn't want to lose you. You already did. The words felt too easy coming out. Too clean for how messy my insides were. I didn't touch her, he repeated as if that somehow made it better. I swear. But I thought about it. Thought about running. About escaping this, whatever we had. Because it scared me. You don't get to run from love and call it fear, I snapped. You chose this. You chose secrets. And you let me bleed alone while you played the martyr. We stood there in silence, the candle flickering between us like it was the only thing still alive in the room. I never meant to hurt you, he said finally, voice barely a whisper. But you did, I replied. And the worst part is, you didn't even have the courage to do it honestly. He reached out then, maybe instinctively. A hand to my arm, gentle, familiar. But I stepped back. For the first time I saw him for what he really was. Not a mystery to solve, not a puzzle to fix, not a broken man in need of rescue. Just a coward. And I'd spent too long mistaking that for depth. I didn't tell him to leave. I didn't need to. He picked up his bag in silence and walked out again. And this time I didn't ask him to come back. The first thing I noticed after he left was how quiet the apartment became. Not just the absence of footsteps or the rustling of his clothes, but a deeper kind of silence. The kind that echoes. The kind that makes you realize how much space one person can take up, even when they barely touch you. I didn't cry. Not that night. Maybe I'd already shed too many tears on things that didn't deserve them. Or maybe part of me was still waiting to wake up and find him in the kitchen, cooking eggs he wouldn't eat, humming some old song off key. But he didn't come back. And for the first time I didn't want him to. The days that followed blurred into one another. I moved through the apartment like a guest. Every room held memories, fragments. The sweater draped on the couch, the book he left dog-eared beside the bed, the coffee mug with a chip he never threw away because it had character. I started packing things up, not because I was leaving but because I needed the air to change. I needed the version of us that lived in this space to finally die. One night I lit every candle I owned. Something about the glow made the emptiness feel warmer, less hollow. I put on the record we used to play during dinners. Not for nostalgia. Not to remember him. To remember me. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the rug in the living room, staring out the window. The city looked different from this angle. Softer, almost forgiving. And then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I let myself feel. All of it. The loneliness. The betrayal. The shame of wanting someone who couldn't, or wouldn't, want me back the way I deserved. The anger at myself for making excuses, for calling dysfunction devotion. I thought about the times I dressed up just to sit beside him on the couch, hoping he'd look at me like a woman instead of a porcelain figure he was too afraid to touch. I thought about the months I spent thinking I needed to earn his affection, as if love was a reward I hadn't quite qualified for. I thought about Nina. And I hated her. But more than that, I pitied her. Because maybe she too once mistook his quiet intensity for something safer than it was. Maybe she too thought she could love him back into being whole. The next morning I called Lila. She came over within the hour, no questions asked, just arms full of snacks and a bottle of something stronger than wine. We sat cross-legged on the floor like we used to in college, blankets wrapped around us like armor. I feel stupid, I said eventually, voice cracking despite myself. You're not, she replied. You're just human. I kept thinking if I was patient enough, soft enough, he'd let me in. He handed me the bottle. You were plenty. He wasn't. I looked at her then, really looked. Do you think he loved me? She hesitated, then said, I think he tried. But love without courage isn't love. It's fear pretending to be something noble. That stayed with me. Later that night, alone again, I stood in front of the mirror and took off the sweatshirt I'd been living in. Underneath I wore nothing. Just skin and breath and bruises the world couldn't see. I touched my own shoulder, slowly, like a stranger. It had been so long since anyone had. I thought about all the nights I'd waited for him to reach for me. To make me feel seen. Desired. But the truth is I've been real this whole time. He just couldn't bear to see it. And maybe I no longer needed him to. I started writing again. Not in the half-hearted, scattered way I used to when I needed to vent. But deliberately. Purposefully. I filled page after page with pieces of myself I'd long forgotten. Memories, confessions, even poetry I didn't know I was still capable of. I wrote about what it felt like to be wanted halfway. To be held with hesitation. To be loved like a porcelain doll. Admired, protected, but never truly touched. The act of writing felt like reclaiming something. My voice maybe. My worth. Or maybe it was just a way to make sense of the mess he left behind. A week passed before I heard from him again. A single text. Can we talk? I stared at it for an hour. Maybe longer. My fingers hovered over the screen, composing replies and deleting them just as fast. I hated how my body still reacted to him, how my heart raced, how my stomach twisted. Even after everything, some part of me still craved his presence, his explanation. His voice. But I didn't respond. Not that day. Instead, I spent the evening rereading one of his journal entries. The one where he said he wanted to be better. Where he swore he wouldn't hurt anyone else the way he'd hurt Nina. He wrote that months before he met me. Before he made me collateral damage in his war with himself. The next day another message came. Please. I owe you the truth. Maybe he did. But I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. That evening, as I was sorting through my dresser, I found the box he gave me on our 6-month anniversary. It was small, wooden, hand-carved. Inside had been a simple gold ring. No diamond, no flourish. He said it was a promise, not a proposal. That someday when we were both ready he'd get down on one knee. I hadn't worn it in months. It sat now at the bottom of the box, dull and lifeless. I turned it over in my hand, thinking about all the promises people make when they're too afraid to follow through. I didn't cry. Instead, I packed the box, the ring, the journal, and a letter I wrote but never sent into a paper bag. And the next morning I went to the clinic. I wasn't sure what I'd find. If he'd even be there. But as I stepped inside, the receptionist looked up and asked, "You're here to see him?" I didn't even have to say his name. She pointed down the hall. "Room 3. He's expecting you." I walked slowly, my heart pounding with every step. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment before knocking softly and opening it. He was sitting in a chair by the window, pale and tired. His eyes lit up when he saw me, but not with joy. With relief. With guilt. I didn't speak. I just handed him the bag and sat down across from him. He opened it slowly. Looked at the ring first. Then the journal. Then the letter. He didn't read it. "Not yet. I didn't think you'd come," he said quietly. "I almost didn't. I'm not good at this," he whispered. "I never was. Even with her, it was all damage control. I was always trying to fix things after they broke." "Maybe stop breaking them," I said softly. He looked at me, then really looked. "I thought I was protecting you. From me. From the version of me that loses control. That confuses desire with destruction. And in doing that," I said, "you made me feel like I wasn't worth wanting." His face twisted, and for a moment he looked like he might cry. "I wanted you," he said. "So badly it terrified me. But every time I got close I saw her. I saw the worst parts of me. I didn't want to do that again. So you let me think it was about my purity. About some twisted virtue." He nodded slowly. "Because it was easier than admitting I was still broken." We sat in silence for a long time. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "But I also don't trust you. And I don't think I ever will." He nodded again, his eyes glassy. "I needed to hear that," he whispered. I stood then, gathering my coat. "Don't reach out again. Not because I'm angry, but because I need to heal somewhere you don't exist." He looked down at the bag in his lap. "Will you take the ring?" "No," I said. "It was never mine. Just like you never really were." And with that I walked out. I didn't look back. Not once. The first thing I did when I got home was open the windows. All of them. Let the cold rush in and cut through the stale air he left behind. I wanted it gone. His scent, his energy, the invisible weight that had settled into the corners of every room. The silence that once felt suffocating now felt clean. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel strong either. What I felt was empty. Not in a painful way, but in a way that meant there was finally space for something else to grow. Something mine. I started rearranging the apartment. I moved the bed to the opposite wall. Switched out the curtains. Packed away the old wine glasses we used to toast with on anniversaries that never meant what I thought they did. It was symbolic, maybe. Or just a distraction. But every shift felt like a small reclaiming of self. Friends started checking in more. Lila came by with a giant bag of thrift store candles and a playlist she called "Men Are Temporary, Vibes Are Eternal." We danced in the living room until we were breathless, laughing so hard we couldn't remember why we'd cried in the first place. One afternoon I walked into a bookstore and bought myself a new journal, leather-bound just like his but a different color. I wanted to write my own narrative now. Not wrapped in someone else's pain. Not trapped in the space between their guilt and my longing. Some entries were short. Others ran pages. I wrote about everything. Sunlight on hardwood floors, the smell of clean sheets, how silence could feel like a friend again. I wrote about him too. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Like charting a storm that had passed and understanding how it formed. One night as I was writing, a text came in from an unknown number. "I hope you're okay. I still think about you." I stared at it for a long time. My heart didn't skip. My breath didn't catch. It was just a string of words from a man who had once meant everything. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned my phone over and kept writing. Days turned into weeks. The apartment started to feel like mine again. I replaced the framed photo of us on the hallway shelf with a picture of me and my sister from a road trip years ago. Wind in our hair, sun in our faces. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I saw myself like that. Free, light, untouched by his shadows. I went out more. Coffee dates with coworkers, long walks through the park, nights at home with books and music and quiet that no longer hurt. I even smiled at someone in the produce aisle. Tall, kind eyes. A soft, "Excuse me," as he reached for the same apple. Nothing came of it. But for a moment I remembered what it felt like to be noticed in a way that didn't burn. It was subtle, the way I began to return to myself. Like peeling off layers of skin that no longer fit. Like realizing I'd mistaken his withholding for depth. Like seeing the truth of it all, not as a tragedy but as a turning point. He had loved me in the only way he knew how, fearfully, distantly, with hands too scared to touch. And I had loved him in spite of it. I had given him the benefit of every doubt. But love shouldn't require you to disappear just to make someone else feel whole. That was the lesson. And maybe, just maybe, that was the gift. It had been almost 2 months. 2 months since I last saw him. 2 months since I stood in that clinic room and told him not to reach out. And he hadn't. Till now. It was a Sunday morning and I was still in pajamas, hair tied up, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug filled with coffee that had already gone cold. I was halfway through a new journal entry when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole I saw him. He looked older. Not in the obvious ways. No gray hairs or slouched posture, but in the eyes. Like something inside had finally stopped fighting. He held a small envelope in his hand. No bag. No flowers. Just that. I didn't open the door right away. Part of me thought about pretending I wasn't home. But another part, calmer, stronger, wanted to see. Not for closure. I'd already given that to myself. When I opened the door I didn't speak. He handed me the envelope then stepped back. I won't stay, he said. I wrote something. I didn't know where else to put it but in your hands. I looked down at it. My name written in his handwriting. Simple. Familiar. I'm not trying to undo anything, he added. I just needed you to know that I finally understand. I nodded once and he turned to go. He didn't ask to come in. Didn't try to touch me. He just left, the sound of his footsteps fading down the hall like an echo I was finally ready to let go of. I closed the door, locked it, and stared at the envelope for a while before opening it. It was a letter. 5 pages. No dramatics. No manipulation. Just truth. He wrote about Nina. How their relationship had become an addiction. Not to her but to the version of himself he was around her. How he tried to erase that man by becoming the opposite with me. Polite. Restrained. Safe. He wrote about the fear. How desire had always felt like a weapon in his hands. How he'd mistaken love for control. How he thought denying himself meant protecting me when in reality he was just avoiding the parts of himself he still hadn't forgiven. I wanted you in every way a man can want a woman, he wrote. But I convinced myself that touching you would stain you. Not because you were pure, but because I wasn't. That sentence stayed with me. He ended the letter with no request. No plea. Just a single line. Thank you for showing me what real love looked like even when I didn't know how to hold it. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because it didn't deserve the fire. Not anymore. That night I went for a walk. The city was quiet, the streets wet with rain. I didn't carry an umbrella. I let the drops fall on my face, soak into my clothes. There was something cleansing about it. Honest. I passed by the cafe where we had our first date. It was still open. The same string lights in the window. The same chipped red chairs. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I kept walking. Past the bookstore. Past the river. Past all the places that used to ache when I looked at them. Somewhere along the way I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. Not at Nina. Not even at myself. Grief had softened into understanding. And love, true love, had quietly turned inward. He had been a chapter. But I was the story. I still think about him sometimes. Not in the way I used to, aching, longing, replaying every detail like I could rewrite the ending if I just stared hard enough. No, it's different now. Softer. Like remembering a dream that used to wake me up in tears, but now just lingers quietly in the corners of my mind. I think about how I used to wait for his touch like it was a kind of salvation. How I confused restraint with reverence. How I folded myself smaller and smaller to fit inside the space he was willing to offer. But I don't live there anymore. Now when I wake up, the bed beside me is empty and peaceful. The silence doesn't bite. It breathes. I light candles in the evening because I like the way they flicker, not because I'm waiting for someone to come home. I make dinner for one, plate it with care, sit by the window and eat slowly. No performance. No pretending. Just me. And sometimes that feels like more than enough. I've started going to a small yoga class on Thursday evenings. The instructor's name is Cam. He has kind eyes and always brings his dog, who sleeps curled up in the corner of the room. After class, we all sit on the floor and drink ginger tea while someone plays guitar. There's no pressure there. No expectations. Just space. I never realized how starved I was for space that didn't demand I shrink. A few weeks ago, Cam asked if I wanted to grab lunch sometime. Just lunch. Just company. I said yes. And it was simple. Easy. He didn't ask about my past and I didn't offer. We talked about books, favorite soups, a childhood fear of thunderstorms. And when he walked me home, he didn't lean in. Didn't push. He just smiled and said, "See you next Thursday." It was the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I owed anything in return for kindness. I'm not in love. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. But I'm open. I've learned that healing doesn't arrive with fanfare. It's quiet. It shows up in the ordinary. In mornings when you don't dread the day. In walks that don't lead you past ghosts. In moments where you reach for your own hand before anyone else's. Sometimes, when the wind hits just right, I remember the last thing he ever said to me. "I loved you. I just didn't know how." And I smile just a little. Because I finally understand that loving someone isn't enough. You have to be ready. You have to be whole enough not to turn your fear into someone else's burden. I wasn't too pure. I wasn't too good. I wasn't too anything. I was just with someone who couldn't meet me where I stood. And now I'm walking forward alone. But I'm not empty. I'm full of everything I gave to him and never got back. And this time I'm keeping it. It's spring now. The city is blooming again in that gentle, unhurried way that almost goes unnoticed until one day, you look up and realize everything's green. The trees outside my window sway with soft confidence. The tulips in the park are already halfway open. And the breeze smells like rain and renewal. It's funny how much the world can change while you're busy putting yourself back together. I've moved into a new apartment. Smaller but brighter. The kind of place where light spills in through sheer curtains and lands on the hardwood like a warm sigh. There's no trace of him here. No photos, no memories hanging in the corners like cobwebs. Just clean walls, shelves full of books, a chair by the window where I drink tea and write. Sometimes I think about what I would say if I ever saw him again. If we passed each other on the street, or if he came across my name by accident in some conversation and wondered. But the truth is, I don't think I'd say much. I think I'd smile. Maybe nod. Maybe nothing at all. Because I don't need anything from him now. Closure isn't something you're given. It's something you choose. And I've chosen it. I no longer shrink from mirrors. I no longer trace the edges of my body wondering what made me unworthy of touch. I no longer measure love by how much I have to withhold to be enough. I have learned to hold myself. To listen to my own silence and trust it. To sit in my own company and feel peace rather than absence. I've learned that love should never feel like waiting. It should never feel like walking barefoot through someone else's pain just to reach the door they've already locked. And when the time comes, because I believe it will come, I'll meet someone who doesn't flinch from my light. Who doesn't confuse purity with fragility. Who sees my fire and doesn't try to tame it but builds something with me beside it. Until then, I'm here. In this quiet, beautiful life I've built with my own hands. And for the first time in a long time, I am not longing for what was. I'm not looking back. I am choosing myself. Every damn day. And it's enough. It's more than enough.